My 30F husband, 33M, wanted to open the marriage 2 years ago, and after months of guilt tripping, I finally agreed. After a year, I started trying it out, and now he wants to end the marriage again. My spouse and I met in college and got married a few years later. 6 years into his marriage, he expresses sorrow that he never had the opportunity to really enjoy the bachelor life because we had been together since middle college. He had 2 partners before me. He is my only partner, and I am quite pleased with that. Not long after, he jokingly suggested an open marriage because it is what everyone is doing these days, according to him, and my heart sunk. I declined. I wondered if I wasn't hot enough or exciting enough in bed, or if he was simply bored with me despite the fact that I always give him enough space. I mean, I consented to all of his quirks in the past, and I work out religiously with weightlifting and yoga while eating really healthy meals, so I'm pretty darn fit. I always scheduled at least 2 date evenings per month and always participated in his interests when he asked, even if I had no interest in them, such as race car courses or the range. He persisted in his plea, making me feel bad for not allowing him to enjoy his youth while he still had it. He eventually broke me down, and I reluctantly agreed to a don't ask, don't tell policy. When it all started, I didn't bother to participate. I just went about my business as usual, except that he would go to more boys' night outs and bars, and I would see dating apps on his phone. I eventually chose to use dating services because I was home alone at night more often on Fridays and figured I might as well give it a shot after my woman friends pushed me to. Fast forward a few months, and now when I tell my husband I can't keep him company during his hobbies, he gets upset and wants to know what I'm doing, even if I just say it's a date. He sought further information despite the don't ask, don't tell principle. And as the months passed, he became increasingly angry and decided to end the marriage. I met some really lovely, nice men who appear to enjoy my company and want to do things I want to do, so I say no, and the guilt trip begins again. Now he says he wants a baby, and I should stop this because it is not good for our future children to grow up with parents like this. When we got married, he said he never wanted children, and I said I did, but I'm fine with not having them since I wouldn't want to have children with a man who didn't. Ada, why didn't you agree to end the marriage and cut relations with everyone I met? Edit, I had made plans more than a month in advance. He makes arrangements the night or 2 before, and they are limited to his hobbies. He made me agree that if we decided to close, we both had to agree beforehand for it to be valid. Ada, for refusing to let my stepson's dogs inside, my marriage is falling apart as a result of this. My wife and I have been married for around 3 years. We had both previously been married to other people. My first marriage lasted 21 years, hers for around 9. We married after roughly a year of dating. She has a 16-year-old son with her. I had a daughter of around the same age who spent time with both me and her mother. Anyway, my new wife and kid have moved in, and she has asked whether he can get a dog. I had 2 tiny dogs with me at the time, whom I had owned for several years. I figured he would acquire a smaller breed dog, given that we had a small house, a little yard, and 2 small dogs. Wow, was I in for a surprise. He goes out and gets a puppy that, at 3 weeks old, already towers above my 2 dogs. The dog is pure hell. He nibbles on anything he can get his mouth on. He ruins my sound system, which included clipped speakers. He ate a chunk out of my coffee table, chewed up my $700 rug, and it simply never stopped. I was quite outraged by all of this, and much more upset when I discovered her son setting up his phone to record me when he left the house, to ensure I wasn't nasty to his hellhound. He would also take it upon himself to check any footage from my outdoor security system. My wife never said anything to him about it. I finally had enough and informed them that the dog was no longer welcome in the house. He becomes enraged, moves out, and hasn't spoken to me since. He arrives at his mother's house to pay her a visit, but he brings the dogs. He also went out and purchased another dog of the same type, and informs her that he will not be let inside since his dogs are not permitted. Granted, I did make the concession that the dogs may stay in the backyard while he was there, but that wasn't enough, as he refused. Now, after years of battling about this, it has drove me nuts, and I yelled at my wife, which is now portrayed as the cause of our problems. AITA for telling my MIL that I don't want her here because my child despises her? 26F, I've been with my husband since we were 14, and we recently had a baby 10 months ago. My MIL and I have always gotten along. She's a lovely woman who would practically take the shirt from her back to make sure I was okay. I adore this gal. But for some reason, every time she comes over to visit the baby, my daughter screams bloody murder the entire time she is there. She does not do this with anyone else. But as soon as my mother-in-law goes through the door and my daughter sees her, she starts screaming, hyperventilating, and crying in my ear. It's been like this since she was born. My mother-in-law first saw her when she was 4 days old, and it was the same. We've never been overly cautious about having people around to see our daughter, but as I mentioned, she's not like that with anyone else. For example, she does not want some individuals to touch her, yet she does not cry. My mother-in-law is the exact polar opposite. She was able to hold her once without her screaming, but it was when she was facing away from her and my husband was entertaining her to keep her distracted. My mother-in-law comes over once a week, and I've recently begun to dread her arrival because, I'm not joking, my daughter cries the entire time, and she sometimes stays for many hours. It is not enjoyable for anyone involved. She arrived yesterday, and my husband is becoming increasingly upset by our daughter's refusal to warm up to his mother, despite the fact that she has been such an important part of our lives. So he suggested that she start coming here more frequently than she already does in order to practically force the bond. I know it doesn't work that way. I mean, if the bond was going to happen right now, it would have already occurred. She simply dislikes my MIL. I suspected it was the perfume my mother-in-law used, so she stopped using it, but nothing changed. I told her not to wear her jewelry to see if that would help, but it didn't. I've even had her put her hair up, believing my daughter was being overwhelmed by not being able to see her entire face, and that only made things worse. I advised her not to baby talk her. She has a very high-pitched baby talk voice, but her normal voice did not soothe the baby down either. And, frankly, I'm exhausted and fed up with trying. I don't think we should try. I believe we should let it go and let it develop naturally. She'll warm up to her in her own time. But my husband is generally against it, because my mother came here to see us for the first time last month. She lives in the UK and finds it difficult to get to the United States, and our daughter immediately fell in love with her and did not want her to leave. As a result, my husband felt slighted, and as I previously stated, he wishes his mother would visit here more frequently. I normally don't mind when my mother-in-law stops by, but she came by unannounced this morning at 8:30 a.m., and I had just gotten up with the baby. She had a terrible night teething, so I'm talking about 3 hours of sleep. She comes in and says my husband told her to come over and hang out for the day. She claimed she had freed her entire schedule to be here. I just shook my head and replied, I really don't want to deal with the baby crying all day. I wish you would have run this by me. You know I enjoy having you here, but this whole let's force a bond nonsense is weighing me down mentally. You guys should have asked me. She looked hurt and murmured, It's okay, sweetie, I can go, before leaving a few minutes later. But now my husband is upset with me, believing that this would have worked. Ada for breaking a 5-year relationship because my girlfriend wants to sleep with a doctor during her rural practice. Here is the original post. Sorry, I don't really know the etiquette here. Still, I'd want to thank everyone who provided valuable information, counsel, and words of understanding, allowing me to recognize that not only did I make the correct decision, did not rush the gun, and did not end things over a minor issue, but that I should have ended things sooner. It seems apparent now, but when the person I loved and trusted looked me in the eyes with wrath and stated that I made a mistake, that I gave up so quickly for a trivial problem, that I didn't fight or attempt to understand, and that she only wanted to discuss things. I briefly believed her. Not anymore. Not blame those who claimed this was a hoax. I'm actually thrilled some people think that because it implies that this thing was so insane that I didn't overreact at all, and I can't believe I ever believed I did. I suppose love makes you dumb and blind. I tried to correct some grammar and whatnot. So, I know this will be somewhat long, but I believe some context is required. We had our first serious relationship and our first encounters. We both studied medicine, not in the United States, and had a very solid relationship, with few arguments and both happy and satisfied, or so I believed. A year ago, she suggested before a trip I was planning that if I found someone, I could travel with them because it was such an opportunity. That sparked a serious debate in which I stated unequivocally that I would never desire an open relationship and that if she required one, we would have to part ways. She apologized for risking the relationship, admitted it was a stupid thing she said without thinking about it, and we continued on as usual. Now I know in retrospect that this was the first significant red flag. During our studies, we are required to travel to a small rural town, not only my girlfriends, but all over the area, for 6 weeks to work at a rural hospital providing various services. Those remote offices have a reputation for being quite harmful for relationships, and the doctors there are known for being overly concerned with the students that arrive. There are numerous reports about them hooking up with the incoming female students. It's quite common. And yes, I think that it is an issue, and it should not be as normalized as it now is because there is a power disparity, and the behavior is very predatory even though both sides are adults. So my girlfriend went to practice, and the first 2 weeks were fine. We saw each other every weekend, and everything was as it had always been, or so it appeared. She then stated that she went to supper with the hospital doctors, but she stayed with one of them until late at night, talking with him. She told me she knew it looked improper, she knew the stories, and she was a little embarrassed about it, but she felt she had done nothing wrong because they had just talked. I agreed, saying she hadn't crossed any lines yet, but it did appear terrible and she shouldn't have done it. She then stated that he invited her to jog, the two of them alone, the other day, and she agreed. I informed her that if she knew the stories and the stigma associated with student-doctor relationships, she wouldn't be doing this. She stated that she only wanted to hang out with someone and that if he expressed interest in her, it would make things awkward. She would not lead him on, keeping her guard up. The next day, she tells me that they didn't jog since it was raining. I informed her that I didn't like that she was playing with fire. She informed me I was correct and that she had reassessed what she was doing because, after giving it some thought, she found the doctor appealing and that continuing would be risky. She stated that his intentions were still unclear, but she would be impressed and pleased with herself if he attempted to make a move on her. Since all of this was going on, I brought up what we had previously discussed about open relationships. She had some time to think about it, and when we spoke again, she stated it was something she was interested in, that she would like to try it sometime, and that she believed it could work. I made it very plain that I would never consent to that. She replied that was all right, that she would never ask me to initiate the connection, and that it was only a fantasy she had in her mind. Cut to 4 days later, when we meet again. She believes we should chat. She told me that the doctor was now really hitting on her and made it apparent that he wanted to have intercourse with her, and she, too, wanted to sleep with him. She stated that the remote practice provided an excellent opportunity to try something new and sleep with someone else. She stated that she wanted to explore that aspect of herself, and the doctor provided the perfect opportunity to do so. She was attracted to him. She stated it wasn't a big issue, she just thought he was kind of handsome, and it's quite rare for her to get the attention of another man, so she wanted to try something new. I stated that I believed she was crossing a line, that she was continuously pushing limits, and that my mentality was clear, I would never consent, but your desire was so strong that you felt compelled to ask again. She said, "Okay, then we can just continue our relationship as usual, and I will respect it as I always have and not go with the doctor." She expressed her love for me and her satisfaction with our relationship. The next day we chatted again. After our last talk, I was already kind of made up my mind to ultimately stop things, and she again stressed how much she wanted to have sleep with him, how important it was to her, and how she didn't know when she would have another chance to have sleep with someone else. Later that day, I went to her house. She was home for the weekend, and broke our relationship. She was outraged, saying I stopped things over a stupid matter, that I didn't fight for the relationship, that I couldn't tolerate her having feelings for another man, and that she was willing to fight and not go to the doctor and attempt to carry on as normal. My husband wants to put CCTV around the flat because of scratches on my back that I cannot explain. I have very sensitive skin, and especially in the summer, the heat causes my skin to get itchy. My hubby knows this because I occasionally wake up with scratches all over me. My husband was promoted at work, and he now works 1 week every month from the capital. He arrived home a day early this morning, and while we were showering, he discovered severe scratches on my back and inquired about them. Wow, that explains the blood in the bed. I had to wash the bedding at 7 a.m. He was silently observing me. Then he inquired why I was washing so early, and I answered again. Then he questioned, "Who did this to you?" I told him it was probably me sleeping as usual, but he said the scratches were too far in the center for my hands to reach. I told him it wasn't true because he knew I was flexible and could reach my entire back with my hands, which is probably typical, but he is quite muscular and can only reach his scapula, so he asked me to demonstrate. Retrace the scratches. I it. I could touch the scratches, but he stated they were too deep for my fingers to reach. I showed him my legs, which are frequently scarred in the summer because I scratch them while sleeping. He was not pleased. I became enraged and informed him that I did not cheat on him, if that is what he was implying. His ex cheated on him, and he's had trust issues since. Also, he has an eating disorder, so we haven't had proper sleep in 6 years, therefore he claimed I had good enough reason to cheat. Now he says he wants to install CCTV. His reasoning is that if you aren't doing anything wrong, you shouldn't be concerned. I told him a big no, but he said, "What are you hiding?" Wibta for seeking a divorce after my wife violated my trust. When I was a kid, I was groomed by a cousin 11 years older than me, and when I was 13, she became pregnant and had the child. As you might expect, it put a lot of pressure on me, and she was eventually caught and sentenced to prison. The child was removed from her and placed in foster care/adoption, and I was not permitted to have any contact with the child of my parents, and social services both forbidden this. He is now 26 years old and, from what I understand, has had a pretty rough existence. I continue to have no interaction or communication with him. Despite troubles in my teens, I turned my life around and am now married to my wife, with whom we have a daughter. I have a son, 19M, from a former relationship, whom I had sole custody of until I met my wife, and she has a daughter from another relationship. I'm not new to Reddit, so I'll answer now. Yeah, I've had therapy and counseling for everything. We've had a relatively nice family unit for a few years, but 3 years ago, I had a difficult time with my son after he learned about what happened to me as a child and discovered that he technically has an older half-brother and wanted to have a relationship with him. Despite how difficult it was for me, I promised, and my wife mainly agreed, to be his main supporter and be behind it all on the condition that A, I have no contact with him, and B, our daughter is not aware of it and is kept out of it. My argument for the latter is that she's too young to find out, and I don't want to confuse her at such a young age. She's also a youngster who will talk about it, and I don't want anyone finding out about my business. My wife agreed, and my kid followed my desires, and everything has gone smoothly as far as I know. The 26M was released from prison a few years ago, and I understand my son met him. I believe my wife pulled back after a while because he is now mature enough to communicate on his own. I never said she would never be told the truth. I only stated that we would inform her when she was old enough to understand. Last week, I noticed my kid drew a picture and questioned her about it. She was a little bashful and acting like she wasn't allowed to say anything, but I persisted, and she responded. It was a photo of her family. It included me, her mother, my son, her older sister, and her big brother, in her words. After some persuasion, I asked her about it, and she claimed she occasionally sees him with Mummy on their own. I asked her how long it had been going on, and she said it had been since she was a child, but her mother said she wasn't meant to talk about it and told her not to tell Papa because it would disturb me. I reassured her that she was not in danger and that I was not furious with her, and then questioned my wife about it when she got in. She agreed it was real, and when I inquired how long it had been going on, she replied it had been since my son made contact 3 years ago. She took my kid to see him in prison once because she didn't have childcare that day, and she has continued to take her since he was released. I asked her who knows, and she replied that everyone knows, including her, my son, and my stepdaughter. I was so irritated that I packed some belongings and left the house, and I've been lodging at an Airbnb ever since. She, my son, and even my stepdaughter have all attempted to contact me in order to discuss the matter. I simply cannot face them. I know I need to go home today and am thinking about it, but I honestly feel like I can't bear them all and am considering filing for divorce. My wife was the only person in my life who I trusted and who had my back enough to discuss anything with, and I believe she has done something similar to what my rapist did in betraying my confidence. Despite her repeated apology, she continues to maintain that she did it for our kid and felt sorry for the older lad. Wibta? Update: I'm going to go home and talk to everyone. I really miss my kids and the dog. I have no idea what will happen. Update 2. So I arrived home and had a chat with my wife. I have decided that I do not want a divorce, but we will separate for a period, and she will live with my stepdaughter. We're going to try couples counseling and see where it takes us. Ada, why did you insist on a paternity test before I signed the birth certificate? My partner and I believe in E&M. We are not claiming that it is right for everyone, but it works for us. I work in town and have multiple partners to cover her shifts. She works on a large construction project on the West Coast and returns home for 1 week after working 2 weeks. She has no trouble finding a companion because men outnumber women by around 30-1. Recently, she became pregnant. We are very cautious and employ precaution. However, I recognize that this is not always 100% effective. I'm delighted for a kid and glad we're starting a family, but I'm not interested in paying to raise someone else's child. I informed her that we needed to get a paternity test. She mentioned that I was the father. I said it was fantastic. I only needed proof. She said no. I stated that without documentation, I would not sign the birth certificate and would be moving out, therefore I could not be considered a parent. She believes that because we are in a relationship, I need to step up. As I have stated, I am not opposed to raising a child who is not my own. I simply won't pay for the pleasure. AITA for constantly preparing a bland meal for my sister-in-law when we entertain at our house since she thought my cooking was peasant food. I wrote a long back about serving dog food to the woman my brother-in-law later married. Wendy has not altered significantly since then. She did shut up after visiting several taco restaurants and learning what proper barbacoa is. So, whenever we have guests around, I always make a special lunch for her. Usually simply plain unseasoned beef, other than salt and pepper. I'm not a monster. Plain green salad with ranch on the side, and a simple starch such as baked potatoes or white rice. I don't limit her to this meal. I just keep it around in case she finds something objectionable about the other food I make. We recently had a dinner party with my wife's brother and his wife. We also had some new friends over. The wife, Thea, inquired as to if my sister-in-law had any allergies, as she was eating plain roast chicken breast with the aforementioned sides. She was concerned about cross-contamination because there was a lot of other food, I suppose. Thea is a teacher who is extremely concerned about food allergies. Wendy explained that I use cuts of meat that she did not grow up eating and that I refuse to tell her what ingredients are in the food I prepare. This is a fact. I've learned my lesson. I create food that my friends and family like. If I use an ingredient that may violate a dietary limitation, I make it obvious. For example, whenever I serve pork, I make sure everyone knows. I will also answer any allergy-related questions. My sister-in-law claims that I insist on feeding her the blandest foods conceivable. I pointed to the salsa verde on her plate and asked if she wanted extra serranos. Wendy felt mortified once more as the entire situation was revealed. I do not think that was my fault. I've been passive-aggressively making sure she can't complain about my food. My wife suggests that it may be time to cease providing a separate meal for Wendy. I told her she was lucky I didn't feed her dinosaur nuggets and Lunchables. Wibta for breaking up with my boyfriend because he doesn't wash his butt. I recently discovered that my partner does not wash his buttocks in the shower. We were taking a shower together when I observed he applied soap to his hand and carefully massaged it across his body. He stated that he showers with his hand rather than a loofah or washcloth. I also observed he hadn't washed his buttocks. He explained that when he takes a shower, the water rinses over his buttocks, and that is how he washes them. I tried to be kind, since his parents may not have taught him how to shower correctly. I advised him he should open his cheeks and wash in the crack. I assumed we had reached an agreement that he would do so. It all happened on Saturday. Now it's Tuesday, and I've asked him if he's washed his buttocks since our talk. He responded no, because he thought it was disgusting to stick his hand in there to wash it. This time, I'm starting to detach myself from the relationship. IMO, he is a mature man who does not observe basic hygiene. He believes he needs more time to become comfortable with the idea. I'm not sure if I'm being too hard on him, or if my desire to stop things is justified. Do I toss away the best companion I've ever had because of this? Ada, for leaving my fiancé after discovering there were strippers at her bachelorette party? The bitter truth was exposed piece by piece. Ex-fiancé had an intimate relationship with a stripper. It is treatment time. I read most of the comments in the original post and appreciate the suggestions. My issue was not that she was caught off guard by her pals, but that she was lying. Every bridesmaid told a different story, and none of them provided information about what transpired. I suppose you understand that it shatters trust and leads you to suspect that anything is wrong. Reading the remarks made me wonder if there was anything wrong with me. There were a lot of YTAs, and I felt I should apologize. One of the bridesmaids contacted me yesterday evening. I think she saw the message someplace and recognized it. I knew my fiancé was experiencing troubles with her friends since last week, but I had no idea to what extent. Apparently, my ex-fiancé and her close friends accused the girl I met at the mall for everything. This separated the group and resulted in a shouting altercation. I'll omit the personal details, but she eventually told me that my ex-fiancé and other bridesmaids had sex with the strippers. To my knowledge, my fiancé was the only one there with a boyfriend/fiancé/spouse, at least monogamously. She also told me that my ex-fiancé was not surprised by the stripper invitations. She was pleased to see the strippers and thrilled to have an excuse. I don't have proof for all of these, but I did get a short video of chicks making up with strippers. One of the girls is my ex-fiancé, so that's enough. She has been attempting to contact me since we broke up. I confronted her again. At first, she refused it again, then we merely touched, then we kissed, then I gave him a hand job, and then I was persuaded into doing these by others as I pushed on. I simply blocked her after the last part. I didn't see any reason to study more. I was already heartbroken, but finding that I had been cheated hurt even more. Even now, I'm not sure if it's completely accurate. I'll never know, but I can tell it hurts. I'll see a therapist to avoid carrying my baggage into my future relationship. I lost $15,000 due to wedding-related expenses and will need to focus on covering the gap for the foreseeable future. Some misogynists made bizarre comments about women, which I will simply disregard. Some folks called me an insecure, unfunny nerd for playing World of Warcraft at my bachelor celebration. Isn't the goal of bachelor parties to have one last fun? It was non-stop raiding with the lads for me, not having one last sexual interaction with a stranger or having a stranger's buttocks on my face or penis.